Welcome to Lesson 9 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is Chilean sea bass with prosciutto, roasted with miso. This simple dish showcases Japanese flavors and introduces the wonders of miso. Miso is a paste made from fermented soybeans. It has a wonderfully deep, salty taste and a delicious flavor that the Japanese call umami, the so-called fifth primal flavor. Miso makes a great marinade or the base of a glaze. I know what you're thinking. Why prosciutto again? The techniques of this preparation are similar to Lesson 6, braised chicken thigh in cocotte. In that lesson, the prosciutto protected the chicken and added flavor until it was fall apart tender. But fish cooks much faster than chicken and falls apart much more quickly when roasted. Here we wanted to roast quickly and set, not fall apart. So we use a higher heat and use the prosciutto to protect and form the protein, which in this case is fish. And the prosciutto adds flavor and salt. So this preparation reinforces techniques you have already learned and reinforces the value and uses of prosciutto for the pro. It also shows you that the same techniques can be used to produce similar yet different results. This dish and Lesson 6 are alike in the basic preparation and share that the proteins are wrapped in prosciutto, but they are very different in ingredients, cooking temperature, time, and result. Vary the time, vary the temperature, vary the ingredients, but apply similar techniques to increase your repertoire, flexibility, and creativity. So let's start cooking. Okay, here we are at the board. We're going to go through our our ingredients. First thing we need, obviously, is Chilean sea bass. And this is Chilean sea bass. It has a beautiful mottled gray and black skin. And we're going to keep the skin on, and we're going to make that actually part of the presentation. The Chilean sea bass is an interesting fish. Its original name was Patagonian toothfish. And it's an ugly fish, and it was considered bycatch, meaning that it was either thrown back or it was used for bait and that kind of thing. At some point, somewhere along the line, somebody said, hey, this fish tastes good, and we can sell this, but not with the name Patagonian toothfish. So they changed the name to Chilean sea bass, and it became so popular that it was almost fished out. But this fish came from Whole Foods, which has sustainable supplies. You could also use any other meaty fish, such as halibut or cod. So that's our fish. We need the Chilean sea bass. This is about a pound, and the instructions that come with the description on the video calls for making a small plate for 8, I believe. We're just going to make 1, so we're only going to need a small amount of this, but this would make enough for about 6 to 8 people as a small plate, serving 2 to 3 ounces per person as a small plate. We're also going to need some unsalted butter, or as my automatic spell checker on my phone changes it to insalted butter, so we'll have some insalted butter today that's been already brought to room temperature. We'll also need some mirin. We talked about mirin in a prior lesson. Mirin is a sweet Japanese cooking wine, and I like this particular brand, Mitoku mirin, that's available through Natural Import Company. And what I said in the earlier lesson is what I like about this is that it has no high fructose corn syrup. And we'll also need sake, Japanese sake. And several years ago, it was very hard to get a decent sake in the United States. Now there are a lot of great sake choices. Whole Foods usually has a pretty good selection. And you can buy these small bottles. If you don't want to buy a big bottle, you can get these 300 milliliter bottles. And we're not going to do a sake lesson today, but this is a Junmai sake, which is considered the not a low grade, but it has less polishing of the rice, so it's considered to be less refined. We want to have a dry sake. Sake has a plus and minus measurement. Not all sakes will show what it is on the bottle, but this one does. This one shows that it's a +2. Anything with a plus is a dry sake. And they go up to 10, I believe, and this is a +2. So this is a dry sake. We'll need that for today. We're also going to need, oh, and what is sake? I should say something about that. Sake is often called a Japanese wine. It's really more like beer. It's a double fermented liquid, basically. It's fermented with both koji, which is it's a fungus actually, and it's used to make both sake and to make soy sauce. And it's fermented with the koji. It's also goes through a second fermentation with yeast. So it's really more like a beer, but it's really not like a beer or a wine because it has a double fermentation. Alcohol percent is usually around roughly 15%, something like that. This one is 15%. All right, so we'll also need some white or yellow miso. Now I have here some white and some red miso that I already had. These are the West Bray natural brand, which I got at Whole Foods. Miso is made with basically from fermented soybeans, and the same fungus that's used to ferment sake, koji. So the camera clicked off in the middle of my sentence. The same fungus that's used to make sake, koji, is also used to make miso. And generally, the darker the color, the stronger it is. Now, this is white miso, but it's not anywhere near white, as you can see. It's really a brown color. It's probably a little bit lighter in color when you first get it. But this is the red miso, and it's redder and a little bit darker, but it's not red either. So they're closer to white and red when you get them, or yellow if you get the yellow miso, but they're never exactly those colors. And there's a piece of plastic wrap on the top here to keep out air. So as you take some out of the container, then flatten out what's left and put that plastic back on top, it helps to keep it fresh. But this stuff will last forever in the refrigerator because it has a lot of salt in it. Now, today, in today's preparation, we're going to use the white miso, but I just wanted to show you the red miso for comparison. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say. Oh yes, there is something else I wanted to say about the miso. Miso, they're considered to be 4 flavors in cooking, in Western cooking at least. Those flavors, everybody's probably heard them. It's sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. The Japanese believe that there's a 5th primal flavor that they call umami, U-M-A-M-I. There's no direct translation for the word umami. It's sometimes translated to mean savory, but it's really more than savory, because savory is a term that's used in Western cooking to distinguish between sweet and non-sweet. You have sweet cooking, which is desserts, and you have savory cooking, which is the meal. So savory is really not a great translation, but it's the closest that anyone's come up with. And really, this flavor is something distinct other than the other 4 primal flavors. And so umami is something that we will be trying to develop and bring out in a lot of the preparations in this course. All right, let's see. We'll also need some honey. I've got my honey bear here, 365 brand honey from Whole Foods. And we'll also need some prosciutto. I had opened this one for the other day. This is Colameco's prosciutto, which came from Whole Foods. This one is kind of dry. It's easier to work with. And what's the key with prosciutto? Keep it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. And that's where I'm going to put it right now. Now again, the reason that we do that is to keep it firm. If you leave it out at room temperature, it starts to get soft and melty, and it's a lot harder to peel off from the other layers, and also it's a lot harder to work with. We're also going to need some lime. You can have a whole lime. I had a lime that was partially used, but we're not going to need any more juice than this, so we'll use this partially used lime. We're also going to need some Sansho pepper. Sansho pepper is a Japanese It's not really pepper. We call it pepper. It's actually ground up from a shrub that has leaves that are kind of prickly, kind of like rosemary leaves. It's a mild peppery taste because the Japanese are not really that crazy about real spicy stuff. So it's a mild peppery taste, unique. It's not like anything that we have in Western cooking. So we're going to use Sansho pepper. And also we're going to need some caviar for garnishing. Now this caviar is wild whitefish, Echo Falls brand. It comes from Whole Foods. You can see it has kind of a yellowish color to it. You could also use tobiko caviar, Tobiko. Tobiko is actually flying fish roe, and it comes in a couple of different colors, yellow and orange. And you've probably seen it on top of various sushi dishes as a garnish. And we're using it really as a garnish. You do not need expensive caviar for this. We're really using it more for what it looks like. It provides some color and some texture. But this was probably about $20 for all this. And this would be more than enough to do 8 small plates because we're not going to use very much of it. Okay. And you might have noticed that there's one thing I always talk about that I did not mention for today, and that is salt. We're not going to need any salt for this preparation because we have the prosciutto, which has salt. We have the miso, which has salt in it. So that is all of our mise en place in terms of ingredients. We're going to break. And we're going to come back and I'm going to show you what equipment we will need for today's lesson. Okay, we're back at the board to go over the equipment that we'll need for this lesson. First, we will need cutting board, and we'll also need chef's knife. We will also need a slicing knife. This is both of these knives are Wusthof knives. And we will also need some wax paper, just a small amount. We need it for buttering the cocotte. And as I mentioned in a prior lesson, you can use the paper that the butter is wrapped in. That's the best thing for buttering a dish before you fill it with something. But this butter's already been out of the wrapper, so I don't have the wrapper now. So wax paper is good. You could use a paper towel too, but the paper towel absorbs a lot of the butter, and so you're losing the butter into the paper towel and it's not going onto whatever it is that you're trying to coat with butter. So wax paper is a good thing to use. We'll also need a cocotte. Now we used the cocotte in a prior lesson. It doesn't have to be this. This is a Staub cocotte, S-T-A-U-B. You could use a ramekin if it's about this size. You could use any other dish that's about this size that's oven safe. You could also use a gratin dish, G-R-A-T-I-N, gratin dish. Although the cocotte would be better because it's deeper, and I think deeper is better for this particular preparation. Also, you will need a bowl and a spoon to mix the miso mixture. You don't have to have a juicer for squeezing the lime at the end. You can just squeeze it with your hand, but I like to use the juicer because the juicer catches seeds, and seeds don't go into your preparation. We also need to have something to spoon out the caviar. Now this is a caviar spoon. You're not supposed to use metal spoons in caviar because they say that it changes the taste of the caviar. This is a caviar spoon which is made from horn or bone. However, if you don't have a caviar spoon, use a plastic spoon. Okay? Plastic spoon would be fine. We'll also need a metal spoon, both for making our miso mixture and also for spooning it over the fish at the end. Remember, we're not using measuring spoons, so we're just going to use this, which is a soup spoon. We'll also need a timer. And then finally, we will need an underplate. And I'm going to use this gratin dish. We did this in a prior lesson as well. Once this cocotte comes out of the oven, it's going to be hot, and you may not want to put that down on your table. You may not even want to put that down on your placemat, depending on what you have. I will use these gratin dishes because they have the same basic shape as the cocotte, and I will have it warm so that when the hot cocotte goes down onto the plate, it's not a cold plate, which could cause the plate to crack. So we'll have a warm underplate to take the hot cocotte. You could also, as I mentioned in an earlier lesson, put a bar napkin in here so it doesn't slide around so much. That's an option as well. So that is all of our equipment that we will need for this preparation. So I'm going to break now and reset, and we will start cooking. Okay, we are here at the board to prepare Lesson 9, Chilean sea bass and prosciutto with roasted miso. We have our prep list here, and the first thing on the prep list is to preheat the oven to 400 degrees. I've already turned on the oven. Next thing we're going to do is portion the fish and score it. Now, I brought out a separate board because I just want to keep this board clean, so I brought out a separate board. Now you can see from looking at this piece of fish that there's a natural line in the skin here, there's a natural line here, and there's a natural line here. We're going to portion this into 4 pieces, so it would be kind of obvious to cut along those 4 lines. Well, we are going to cut along the center line, but we're not going to cut along those other 2 lines because we'll end up with pieces that are not roughly the same weight. We want them to be roughly the same weight. This is roughly a 4-pound piece of fish. I'm sorry, a 1-pound piece of fish, and we're going to put the pieces into this cocotte, and I can see that if we were to cut about here and here, that would be a good size to go into this cocotte, right? But we want to have roughly equal weight. So the first thing we're going to do is slice it right down the middle on that line. I see there's a couple of scales here. We want to get rid of those. If you see any stray scales, we want to get rid of those. And then we're going to look at the fish and we're going to say, well, here is probably about equal weight pieces of fish. In other words, each person is going to get roughly the same amount of fish. This piece is thicker, this piece has a thicker area and a thinner area. So we're going to cut it here. That's not exactly on that line that was naturally occurring on the fish skin. Got a few more scales here we're getting rid of. The fishmonger didn't do a really good job at scaling this, so we're just going to see if there are any others. Run your knife in the opposite direction that the scales fall, and it'll lift them up if they're there. Okay, I think we got, oh, there's one. Okay, we're on the board here. All right, then, okay, I think we got all the scales. Same thing on this side. We want to have roughly equal weight pieces of fish, so we're going to cut it here. And that's also not exactly on that line that was naturally occurring on the back side of the fish. See if we've got any other scales here. Same thing here. Okay. Get all those scales off the knife, although we're not really going to use the knife anymore. All right, so now we have 4 pieces of fish. Good. All right, now what we want to do is we want to score the skin just a little bit. We don't want to cut, we just want to cut down to where the meat of the fish is. We don't want to cut into the fish if we can avoid it. Got scales everywhere here. Trying to get rid of them. Okay. So we're going to cut on a diagonal and just score that skin. do three scores. I picked up a couple more scales in the process there. Okay. All right. Very good. Now let's just do another piece. I'll come back and do the rest of these later, but for now we're just going to do 2 of these. We'll do one that's kind of the rectangular piece, and then we'll do one that's kind of curved. And what we're going to do here is we're cutting at an angle, and we're going to turn the fish as we cut into the skin, so that we're not cutting down into the fish, we're just cutting the skin on the top. Okay, and again, we're going to remove those extra scales that are there. Let's see. Okay. All right, so that's scaling, portioning and scoring the skin of the fish. All right, we've done that one and we've done that one. We have not done those 2. Okay, now we're going to place that aside for now, and we are going to next thing on the list is to butter the cocottes. So we have the cocotte here, another cocotte here, and we need some unsalted butter, as we discussed earlier. And just take a little bit of it here and the wax paper, and then use that wax paper to coat the inside. Now the first one that you do is going to get a lot of butter, but you can really spread that butter out on through all the rest of your cocottes. And in fact, what I'll probably do is I'll probably go off camera and finish the other ones, finish the other fish and finish the other cocottes with this same piece of wax paper and with the butter that's ample amount of butter that's in this first cocotte. Okay, so we have buttered the cocottes. I'm going to go off camera and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, off camera I buttered the other 2 cocottes, and I also scored the other 2 pieces of fish. Now what we're going to do is, let's see, we buttered the cocottes, and next we're going to mix the miso sauce. Okay, so first we're going to start with the miso, and here what we're going to do is we're going to do 4 parts to 4 parts to 4 parts to 1 part. So we're going to have 4 parts of miso, 4 parts sake, 4 parts mirin, and 1 part honey. And again, it depends on how much fish you have, and maybe you might want to make some extra and have it for another use at some other time. But what we're going to use is this soup spoon, and we're going to use about 4 of these. Now you can see that that's not a smooth, leveled off spoon, and this isn't even a tablespoon. This is a soup spoon. We're using this so we can have a part, but not a measurement. You have to use your judgment to figure out how much you might need. So we're using 4 parts of miso. Again, if you get slightly more than 4 parts, well, it's just going to probably not affect the taste at all. You know, you'd have to do a side-by-side comparison and have people with a lot of experience to try to figure out which one had, you know, more of what and less of the other. So after you've gotten the miso out of your container, assuming it's a container like this, push all of the extra miso down inside there with a spoon and flatten it out. So you have basically a flat, relatively flat surface inside. Then take the plastic that came out of it and put it back in. And press it down onto the top of the miso so that you have, you know, it's not that you won't have no air, but you basically want to get rid of most of the air bubbles. And that will help to keep it fresh longer. But like I said, this stuff lasts forever because it's fermented, basically. For one thing, it's fermented, and for the other, it is full of salt, which is a preservative. Okay, so finished with the miso. Now, that's 4 parts miso. Now we need 4 parts mirin. So we're going to use our spoon again, so we have roughly the same amount of mirin that we have of miso. We're going to wind up with a little bit more miso because those were not level spoonfuls. Also, you know, we were using 4 of these spoons. If you do use tablespoons, you know, 4 tablespoons is 1/4 of a cup, so you could just use 1/4 of a cup to measure it as well. That's 4 of mirin. We also need 4 parts sake. So we're going to do the same thing. Now we see it's we overflowed a little bit there, so we're going to have you know, a little bit more than 4 parts. That's fine. Good. And then finally we want 1 part honey. Now we can take the spoon and do it, or we can just do what we think about 1 part would be, and that's good enough. All right, then we want to take our spoon and mix it up. Try to get it pretty smooth. Use the spoon to press the miso up against the side of the bowl, which helps to break it up and helps to mix up the ingredients. So you're getting more of a slurry when we're finished here. There's a few little lumps in there, it's okay. We want to try to get most of the big lumps out. Again, just use your spoon to press the miso against the side of the bowl, and it breaks up. Wind up with a consistency color that's kind of like peanut butter, and we have kind of a slurry there. Okay, all right, so now we have our mixed miso sauce. All right, so we have done that. Now we want to wrap the fish in prosciutto, and what do we always do with prosciutto? We keep it in the refrigerator until we need it. So now I'm going to go get the prosciutto. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to peel off, remember, find that paper layer that's between the layers of prosciutto, peel off that paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back into the refrigerator until I need it. You might think that's a little bit extreme, but I'll tell you, if your kitchen is warm, or if it's summer and it's more humid, and your kitchen's going to get warm anyway if you have a stove on and that kind of thing, the prosciutto will melt very fast. So it's best to keep it in the fridge till you really need it. Now, what we're going to do with this preparation is we're going to put the fish down into the middle of the prosciutto. And we are going to, in fact, we're going to do it the other way. Let's do it this way. We're going to pull the prosciutto up the side of the fish and kind of fold it on the top. But we don't want to cover the skin too much. You see, it's getting hard to get off of the paper on this side. Okay. And on this side, we want to fold it up against the fish. So you have, now we can pull it off the paper. So now we have it wrapped basically on 5 sides in prosciutto, but not on the top. We want the top to be exposed to the heat. Okay, so then we're going to take our cocotte and we're going to place that down inside of the cocotte with the skin facing up. We'll do the same thing with another sheet of prosciutto. Okay, here we go. Pull off another layer. You can see that wants to stick to the package. I'll tell you, it would be even harder if it were warmer. Right, so find that paper separator. And then peel off this sheet. Try to leave the last piece of prosciutto in there. It wants to peel away. It wants to stick to the separating paper, actually. And then let's put this away. So we need it. All right, we're going to do the same thing with this next piece of fish. Going to even out this prosciutto a little bit. And we're going to use one of the pieces that's more rounded. There's another scale there. And peel the prosciutto off of the paper separator and press it against the side of the fish and the ends of the fish. So you get a nice little package covering the ends of the fish, covering basically the bottom of the fish, although that's, you can see that prosciutto is kind of come apart a little bit, but spread it back into position, cover the other end of the fish. And like I said in the introduction, the prosciutto helps to protect the fish from the heat. Okay, so that's two of them done. All right, now I will wrap the others off camera, but what we're going to do next is we're going to spoon the mixture, the miso mixture, over the fish. Now, you see how much you have here, and you know how many you're going to make. So you have to divide this roughly equally among the ones that you're making, okay? So we're going to take a spoonful over the top, take another spoonful over the top here. I think we can probably get 2 spoons out of each one. And then I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to do the other 2, and then we'll come back and we'll use the rest of this up. Okay, so we have to divide it up, portion it up among the 4 portions that we're going to make. So I will go off camera for a moment and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I was going to do this off camera, but when I pulled the prosciutto out, there was 1 piece left and there's no separating paper. So I thought I would just show you what I'm going to do to handle that situation. I'm going to put the fish down in the middle. Did we do it this way? Yeah, this way. Put the fish down in the middle of the piece of prosciutto and just leave it on its package and use the package as essentially as the separating paper. So again, press this up against the side. Make a nice little package. It doesn't have to be beautiful because it's going to be down inside the cocotte. Nobody's going to see it. And then, let's see what happened to the bottom here. Yeah, the bottom kind of peeled off a little bit when we pulled it off of the paper. And then put that into the cocotte. Press it up against the sides a little bit more. Now I'll have to open another package of prosciutto to do the last piece. So I'll go off camera and do that. Okay, so we're back and we have all 4 pieces of fish in the cocottes. And as I said in the introduction, you might wonder why we've done prosciutto so much. Well, this is probably the best reason over what I said in the introduction, and that is that sooner or later you're going to want to do a dish with prosciutto. And if you don't have a lot of experience with it, it's going to go really badly. It's not going to go smoothly. The prosciutto is going to be hard to work with. You won't be able to get off the separating paper. It's going to be melting. It'll be falling apart. It'll be sticking in the package. All kinds of things will go wrong. So it's important that you get some experience with prosciutto before you actually try to use it in some preparation that either you make from this course or that you invent on your own. So we're gonna divide up this miso sauce among these cocottes. We got about two spoonfuls so far in each one. Now we're getting the third spoonful in each one. And I think that's enough. We don't want to cover it. We don't want to cover the fish. We want to have a little pool of it down in the bottom. And I can see that with this one here, which has the curve-shaped fish, starting to get down into the pool there. We want the sauce to be maybe, you know, like a quarter of an inch or so in the bottom. Okay, there we go. All right, so we have spooned the miso mixture into the cocottes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put these into the 400-degree oven and we're going to roast them for 15 minutes uncovered. 15 minutes uncovered. So I will put them into the oven. I'll put one into the oven. You know what? We're going to put them on the tray. Okay. Into the oven. Okay, now we'll be back in 15 minutes. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes. The alarm just went off. I just brought them back to the hot board here, and they're bubbling down inside a little bit. The bubbling starting to subside now. They look beautiful. The fish looks flaky and done. And yep, they look good. Now, you know, the 15 minutes at 400. Again, it depends on whether your oven is accurate. You know, your oven may take a little bit less time, a little bit more time. So you may have to experiment with it a little bit. But you want the, well, the camera clicked off again in the middle of my sentence. You might need to experiment with it a little bit. You want the fish to be cooked through, but it can be on the medium side in the middle. It doesn't have to be flaky in the center. But you want it to be flaky on the outside. And the top, you can see the skin looks great. Now most people will just take the skin off and then eat the fish. The skin is not necessarily intended to be eaten, but it could be eaten. Most people will just take it off. All right, so now we are going to break, and I'll be back with the caviar so that we can do our garnishing so it can be served. Okay, so we're back at the hot board. We have our 4 cocottes, and now we just need to put a little lime juice on them. So we're gonna, like I said earlier, you know, I use this lime squeezer because seeds don't go into the dish. Now limes don't have seeds, but lemons do. So I'm in the habit of using it. So we'll just squeeze a little bit of lime juice over the top. You could just squeeze it with your hand if you want to. And then we're going to sprinkle it with the Sansho pepper. Now we're going to garnish it with the caviar. Now I've kept that in the refrigerator until I was ready to use it. You can see this nice yellow color that it has, but like I said earlier, it's really more for a garnish, not so much for the taste. Although the taste is good, it will just add a little bit of saltiness to the dish. But once you start eating it, that's all just going to kind of disappear down into the bottom. Okay. Now, it's been garnished, so let's just check our prep list. We roasted it 15 minutes uncovered. We squeezed the lime. We sprinkled the Sansho. We garnished with caviar. Now, remember I said earlier we should have an underplate. The reason is because when you're bringing this hot cocotte out of the oven, you don't want to put it down onto a cold plate because the cold plate could crack when you put the hot cocotte on it. So we're going to put them onto these warm plates. And that's it. That is lesson 9, Chilean sea bass and prosciutto roasted in miso. To recap, we portioned the fish. We made a sauce, the miso sauce that it cooked in. We roasted the prosciutto wrapped sea bass, and then we garnished it. So that's it. Hope you enjoy it. End of lesson 9.